You know, they say silence is the loudest sound on earth. But I'm telling you, the silence at Evergreen Ridge Cemetery that Tuesday morning was heavy enough to crush your ribs. It was one of those gray, drizzly Seattle mornings where the rain doesn't really fall. It just kind of hangs in the air like a wet curtain, soaking into your bones. Everyone was there, the absolute elite of the city, standing around a mahogany casket that probably cost more than my first house. And inside that box was Evelyn Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Aerospace, a woman who built jet engines that could outrun sound, but apparently couldn't outrun a heart attack at 42. Or at least, that's what everyone in that crowd of black umbrellas believed. Standing right at the edge of the open grave was Marcus Sterling, her husband, looking like he'd stepped out of a GQ spread on grieving widowers. Perfectly tailored suit, just the right amount of stubble, dabbing at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. And if you looked close enough, really close, you could see his fingers were tapping against his thigh. A nervous, rhythmic tapping, like he was checking a stopwatch, waiting for the buzzer to sound. The priest was droning on about ashes to ashes, the mud was slick underfoot, and the guys from the funeral home were gripping the straps, ready to lower Evelyn into the wet earth. And that's when the air just tore open. "She isn't dead. Don't you drop that casket." The voice didn't sound human. It sounded like gravel grinding in a mixer, raw and desperate. And every head snapped back so fast you could hear necks popping. Pushing through the line of security guards at the back was a guy who looked like a walking natural disaster. His name was Caleb Vance, and let me tell you, Caleb was a sight. He was wearing a high-vis vest stained with grease, muddy work boots, and a beard that hadn't seen a tremor in 6 months. His eyes were wild, red-rimmed, staring at that casket like it was the only thing tethering him to the earth. He was the night groundskeeper, the guy people walked past without seeing, the guy who emptied the trash bins and raked the leaves, a ghost in a neon vest. "Get him out of here," Marcus shouted, and the mask of the grieving husband slipped for just a second, revealing something ugly and sharp underneath: security. "Why is this vagrant interrupting my wife's burial?" Two guards, big guys, built like linebackers, lunged for Caleb. But Caleb was fueled by something stronger than adrenaline. Maybe it was madness, maybe it was truth. But he sidestepped them, slipping in the mud, scrambling toward the grave site, panting, pointing a shaking finger at the mahogany box. "I'm telling you, don't put her in the ground. She's breathing. It's the toxin. It just slows the heart. She's still in there." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Nervous laughter, people whispering about mental illness, about calling the cops. But Caleb didn't stop. He fell to his knees right at the edge of the astroturf covering the dirt, looking up at the priest, looking up at Evelyn's aunt, a tough old bird named Martha who was standing there with a cane, looking at him with narrowed eyes. "Listen to me," Caleb pleaded, his voice cracking. "I heard them. Last night, in the maintenance shed. Marcus and Dr. Thorne, they talked about the dosage, tetrodotoxin, pufferfish poison. It mimics death. It doesn't cause it. If you bury her now, she wakes up in the dark. Please, just check her pulse. Check it for a full minute." Marcus turned a shade of purple that you usually only see on bruised fruit. "This is insane. He's looking for a payout." Dr. Thorne pronounced her dead himself. "Thorne, tell them." All eyes shifted to Dr. Reese Thorne, a concierge doctor who charged 10 grand a month just to be on call. He was standing there looking like he was about to vomit, his skin the color of old paper, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. I examined her," Thorne stammered, his voice thin. "There were no vitals. This man is clearly disturbed. Grief makes people imagine terrible things. Let's proceed with dignity, dignity." Caleb roared, and he scrambled up, grabbing the lid of the casket before anyone could stop him. "You want dignity? How about not burying a woman alive?" Marcus lunged at him, actually swung a fist, screaming, "Don't you touch her." But Aunt Martha, bless her heart, slammed her cane down on Marcus's foot hard enough to crack bone. "Let him check," she commanded, her voice cutting through the rain like a foghorn. "If he's wrong, he goes to jail. If he's right, God help us all. Open it." The silence returned, but now it was electric, terrifying. Caleb's hands were shaking so bad he could barely work the latch, but he got it, and he heaved the heavy lid open. Evelyn lay there, looking like a wax statue, pale, lips slightly blue, terrifyingly still. The rain started to speckle her face, see? Marcus hissed, rubbing his foot. She's gone. You desecrated her rest. Arrest him. Caleb ignored him. He reached into his dirty pocket and pulled out a small, crinkled plastic bag with a syringe, not a needle, but a dropper. I broke into the clinic, he whispered, mostly to himself. I stole the epinephrine and the antidote mix. I read the label in their trash. He didn't wait for permission. He pried Evelyn's cold jaw open, and the crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath that sounded like a scream. He squeezed the dropper. 1 drop, 2 drops. He waited. 1 second, 2 seconds, 10. Nothing happened. The rain fell harder. Marcus let out a cruel, triumphant laugh. You see, a maniac. Get him off my wife. Caleb slumped, his head dropping to his chest, the fight draining out of him. No, he whispered. No, I swear. And then, a sound. It was faint, like dry leaves skittering on pavement. A click, a hitch. Everyone froze. Marcus stopped laughing. Evelyn's chest gave a violent, jerky spasm. Then another. And then, a gasp, a horrible, desperate, sucking gasp as her lungs tore themselves open, pulling in air like a drowning victim breaking the surface. Her eyes flew open, wide, terrified, staring straight up at the gray sky and the bearded face of the janitor hovering over her. Evelyn. Aunt Martha screamed, dropping her cane. Chaos doesn't even begin to describe it. People were fainting, screaming, running away, filming with their phones. But Marcus didn't run. He froze. He looked at his wife, who was supposed to be 6 feet under, and the look on his face wasn't relief, it was pure, unadulterated terror. And then, instinct took over. He reached into his jacket pocket, his eyes wild, and he pulled out something metallic, a second syringe. She was supposed to go. He shrieked, totally losing his mind, lunging toward the casket. You ruined it. It's over. But Caleb was ready. He didn't just block Marcus. He tackled him with the force of a freight train, slamming the billionaire into the muddy grass. They rolled, mud flying, tuxedos and work vests blending into a mess of limbs. But Caleb had the rage of the righteous on his side. He pinned Marcus down, twisting his arm until the syringe dropped into the wet earth. Stay down. Caleb roared, saliva flying. You don't touch her again. By the time the police sirens started wailing in the distance, cutting through the rain, Evelyn was sitting up in the casket, shivering violently. Aunt Martha wrapping a mink coat around her shoulders. Evelyn looked around, her eyes struggling to focus, until they landed on Marcus, who was being handcuffed face down in the mud, and then on Dr. Thorne, who was sitting on a tombstone, sobbing into his hands. Finally, her gaze drifted to the man in the dirty vest, breathing heavy, blood from a cut on his forehead mixing with the rain. Who? She croaked, her voice sounding like it had been dragged through broken glass. Who are you? Caleb wiped the mud from his face, looking exhausted. I'm just the guy who takes out the trash, ma'am. But I know rot when I smell it. The fallout was nuclear. The media called it the resurrection on the ridge. Marcus Sterling and Dr. Thorne were plastered on every screen from Tokyo to Toronto. It came out in the investigation that Marcus had gambled away his own fortune and was leveraging Evelyn's company assets to cover debts to some very bad people. Thorne was just a weak man with a blackmail file thick enough to choke a horse. They both went down for attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, you name it. But the real story, the one that happened after the cameras stopped flashing, started about 2 weeks later. Evelyn was back in her estate, a sprawling mansion overlooking the Puget Sound. She was physically weak, still shaking off the neurotoxin, but her mind was sharpening up again. She sent a car for Caleb. Not a limo. She knew he wouldn't like that. Just a town car. When Caleb walked into her library, he looked uncomfortable. He'd shaved the beard, revealing a jawline that was sharp and determined, and he was wearing a clean shirt, but he still held himself like a man expecting to be told to leave. Mr. Vance, Evelyn said, standing up from her desk. She didn't offer a handshake. She walked around the desk and just stood in front of him. You saved my life, and you saved my soul from being buried with a man who hated me. Thank you seems pathetic. You don't owe me anything, Mrs. Sterling, Caleb said. looking at the floor. I did what anyone would do. No, Evelyn corrected him, her voice steel. You did what no one else did. Hundreds of people at that funeral, my friends, my board members, they watched. You acted. Tell me about yourself, Caleb, and don't give me the janitor speech. I had my security team run a background check. You weren't always cleaning graves. Caleb sighed, a long, heavy sound. He walked to the window, looking out at the gray water. No, 5 years ago, I was a structural engineer. I designed bridges, good ones, until the I-90 overpass in Spokane. Evelyn nodded. She remembered. The collapse. 3 people died. The investigation cleared the engineering firm. She said softly, it cleared the firm. Caleb said bitterly, because the firm blamed the lead engineer. Me. They said I miscalculated the load bearing. I didn't. They used substandard concrete to save 3% on the budget. I had the emails to prove it, but my laptop disappeared from the evidence locker. I lost my license. Then the lawsuits started. I lost the house. My wife. She tried to stick it out, but the shame, the reporters on the lawn. She took our daughter and moved back to Ohio, said she couldn't live in the shadow of a killer. I started drinking, ended up sleeping in my car. Then the car got repoed. The cemetery job was the only place that didn't ask for references. He turned back to Evelyn, eyes wet. So, you see, I know what it's like to be betrayed by the people who are supposed to have your back. When I heard Marcus that night, I heard the same tone my boss used when he fired me. That specific kind of arrogance. Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, and she saw a mirror. She was the queen of industry. He was a disgraced engineer. But they both had the same scars: betrayal, isolation, the feeling of being used. I have a proposition for you. Caleb, Evelyn said. I don't want money. He said quickly, I know. I want your brain. I have a division in my company, special projects. We're trying to build a new fuselage for high-altitude transport. My engineers are stuck. They say the materials can't handle the stress. I think they're thinking too small. I want you to look at it. Caleb laughed, a dry, rusty sound. I'm a janitor with a revoked license. Your board will eat you alive. Let them try. Evelyn smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd worn in years. I came back from the dead, Caleb. I'm not afraid of a few board members. Come work for me. Not as a janitor, as my consultant. Now, you'd think this is the part where the montage music starts. Caleb gets a haircut, puts on a suit, and suddenly everything is perfect. But life is messier than that. Caleb took the job, but the first few months were brutal. The engineers at Sterling Aerospace looked at him like he was a stain on the carpet. They whispered behind his back, calling him the gravidigger, tossing his reports into the recycling bin without reading them. He was working out of a small office in the basement because he didn't want to be seen, grinding away at blueprints late into the night, fueled by cheap coffee and the desperate need to prove he wasn't broken. One afternoon, there was a massive stakeholder meeting, the kind that determines the stock price for the next 5 years. The head of engineering, a guy named Prestwick who had an ego the size of a blimp, was presenting the new Stratoglider prototype. Evelyn was at the head of the table, looking pale but fierce, watching Prestwick fumble through excuses about why the wings kept shearing off in simulations. It's a materials limitation, Prestwick insisted, wiping sweat from his forehead. Physics simply won't allow this alloy to hold at Mach 3. We need to lower the speed targets or double the budget. The room was silent. The investors were grumbling, and Evelyn looked ready to snap a pencil in half. That's when the door at the back of the room creaked open, and Caleb walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a clean button-down and khakis, holding a rolled-up tube of paper. Who invited him? Prestwick sneered. Security, please remove the consultant. Let him speak, Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the tension like a laser. Caleb walked to the front of the room, ignoring the glares. He unrolled his drawing right over Prestwick's digital projection. It was a hand-drawn schematic, old school, pencil and ink. It's not the material, Caleb said, his voice steady, the same voice that had commanded a cemetery to stop. It's the harmonics. The vibration at Mach 3 creates a resonance frequency that shatters the alloy. You don't need stronger metal. You need to change the shape of the intake valve by 3 degrees to disrupt the airflow pattern. Prestwick scoffed. 3 degrees? That's ridiculous. A janitor thinks he knows aerodynamics better than a PhD. I calculated the load variance, Caleb said, tapping the paper. Run the simulation. Change the intake angle. If I'm wrong, I'll resign today and go back to raking leaves. Evelyn looked at the IT guy. Run it. The room was dead quiet as the computer crunched the numbers. The progress bar loading agonizingly slow on the big screen. Prestwick was crossing his arms, smirking, ready to humiliate Caleb. But then the simulation turned green. The virtual plane hit Mach 3, then Mach 4. No shear, no brake, stability at 100%. The investors gasped. Prestwick's jaw hit the floor. Caleb just rolled up his paper, looked at Evelyn, and gave a small nod. It's the geometry, he whispered. It's always the geometry. That moment changed everything. Caleb wasn't the gravidigger anymore. He was the guy who saved the flagship project. Evelyn promoted him to lead director of innovation the next day. But more than the work, something shifted between them. They started spending evenings in her office, not working, just talking. He told her about his daughter, how much he missed her. She told him about the loneliness of the ivory tower, how she had married Marcus because she just wanted someone to hold her hand at night. Ignoring all the red flags, they were too lonely. Scarred people finding a safe harbor in each other. And yeah, the tabloids went wild, predicting a wedding, a romance, a fairy tale ending. But that's the thing about real life. Sometimes the deepest love isn't romantic. It's something else. It's witnessing. It's having someone look at your wreckage and say, I see you. And you're still valuable. About a year after the trial, where Marcus got life without parole, and let me tell you, watching him get dragged out of court screaming was satisfying in a way I can't even describe. Caleb walked into Evelyn's office with a strange look on his face. I'm taking some time off, he said. Evelyn looked up, alarmed. Is everything okay? Is it the job? No. Caleb smiled, and his eyes were crinkling at the corners. I found them. My ex-wife and my daughter. They're in Columbus. I called my daughter. She's 12 now. She wants to see me. I have to go, Evelyn. I have to try and fix the bridge I burned with them. Evelyn felt a pang in her chest, a sharp fear of losing him, but she swallowed it down. She stood up and walked over to him, taking his rough hands in hers. Go, she said, fix it. And if they want to move here, Seattle has great schools, and Sterling Aerospace has great benefits for families. Caleb hugged her then, a fierce, crushing hug that said everything words couldn't. You saved me back, you know, he whispered. I pulled you out of the dirt, but you pulled me out of the gutter. Caleb went to Ohio. It wasn't easy. There was yelling, crying, years of hurt to unpack. His ex-wife had moved on. She was remarried to a nice guy named Dave, and that stung. But Caleb focused on his daughter, Maya. He showed up. He stayed consistent. He didn't try to buy her love. He built it back, brick by brick, just like he used to build bridges. Eventually, Maya started spending summers in Seattle. And Evelyn? She didn't stay lonely. A few years later, at a charity gala for spinal research, she met a man named Julian. He wasn't a billionaire. He was a cello player in the symphony. Quiet, kind, with gentle hands and zero interest in corporate power. He loved Evelyn not for the empire she built, but for the way she laughed when she was tired. The ending of this story isn't a wedding between the princess and the pauper. It's better. 5 years down the road, there's a barbecue at Evelyn's estate. It's a sunny day, rare for Seattle. On the patio, Caleb is manning the grill, laughing as his teenage daughter Maya tries to teach him a TikTok dance. Caleb's new partner, a pediatrician named Sarah, is chatting with Evelyn. Evelyn is sitting on a lounge chair, leaning her head on Julian's shoulder, watching the scene. They aren't a traditional family. They're a patchwork quilt of people who had been torn apart and stitched back together with gold thread. Caleb walks over with a platter of burgers, wiping his hands on an apron that says World's Okayest Engineer. He catches Evelyn's eye. They share a look, a secret language forged in a rainy cemetery and a high-stakes boardroom. You know, Caleb says, looking out at the view, I used to think my life ended when that bridge fell down. Then I thought it ended when I was digging graves. But I think I just had to dig deep enough to find the foundation. Evelyn smiles, raising her glass of iced tea. To the foundation, she says. To the foundation, everyone echoes. And that's the truth of it. Folks, we all have moments where we think we're buried. We think the dirt is hitting the lid and it's over. Marcus Sterlings exist in this world, people who want to keep you down, who profit from your silence. But there are Caleb Vances too. People who will scream into the rain for you. People who will check your pulse when everyone else has walked away. But here's the question I want to leave you with. And I really want you to think about this and drop a comment below. Because it's something that haunts me. If you were in that cemetery, if you were standing in the rain, watching a funeral, and you had a gut feeling, just a feeling, that something was wrong, would you have the courage to stop it? Would you risk looking crazy, risk being arrested, risk everything on the slim chance that you were right? Or would you stay silent and let the ceremony proceed because it's polite? Because I'll tell you what, most people would just hold their umbrella tighter and look away. But thank God for the ones who don't. Thank God for the ones who shout. Let me know what you would have done. And if you've ever had a moment where you had to speak up when your voice was shaking, share it. I read every single comment. Until next time, keep your eyes open and never let them bury the truth. Stay safe out there.